Well, welcome to the Gyaff, Alfonso De Armas. Thank you so much for coming, man. I'm glad I finally reached out to you, and it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been following the Gap, the podcast, for a while now.
Yeah,
So I was pleasantly surprised to see that you reached out and you wanted to have me on the show.
for sure. We reach out to many people, and it just like I've been meaning to reach out to you for the longest time, like everybody else. But it's just a process of when can we fit everybody in, and I don't like to overcommit too because sometimes if I set too much people up at once, something comes up with work as well, and then I reschedule. I don't want to waste anybody's time.
Yeah, of course. No, I
Yeah,
completely understand.
yeah.
But it's such a high quality production.
Thank
It's
you.
it's really cool. It is. It's really high quality.
Yeah.
I've seen some other stuff that's not. It doesn't draw you in, right? In terms of the production, yes, but also the conversation that you're able to have. It's pretty cool how you're able to structure it in a non-structured way.
Yeah.
Just like
That's a
right?
good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think, to me, I just think there's a gap in media for discussion. I feel like it's very fragmented. Not to say that this is perfect or this hits it, but people seem to be more relaxed in this kind of setting, and it's long form. In interviews or in news, you're working with time limits, you're working with song bites, and people kind of just want these things said in like a sentence or two, and
Correct.
life isn't really like that. As a matter of fact, I had Critic on last time, and
I watched the critic
yeah,
episode.
he's a character. But somebody was telling me yesterday, oh, I watched your thing with Critic, and it was real nice, but my only criticism, man, it's too long. It's just nobody can watch that. And I'm like, it's not really for people that wanna just. You could go on the news or you could go on Critic's show, and this is just different. This is like we sit down just person to person and hash it out.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like I've been watching Joe Rogan's podcast or listening to Joe Rogan's podcast for a long time now, and I enjoy the long form kind of conversations, the content you cover. You're able to cover so much.
Yeah.
It's not really, like you said, it's not really for somebody who's just wants the sound bites or the quick. What would you call that? Infotainment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I guess so.
You just want that dopamine burst where somebody says something witty, something funny, and then you
could
like
clip
swipe
it.
away,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
That's
just
where we
different.
are now, and I think that's kind of it's dangerous in the age of misinformation because anything could be taken out of context.
Yeah, correct.
So you really gotta be careful. Even when I cut clips for, because and as you said, people prefer that. So I'll cut like clips for Instagram and now TikTok, which I reluctantly got on, but
Yeah.
apparently everybody's on there now. And so I'll cut clips for that, and they watch it, but I always have the long form because you need to, like, the context has to be out there.
Yes.
If you don't, like, if you take this small fragment out of the context. But yeah, how is it like for you? I mean, you're in like a space where communication is very important. How do you see, like, what are the challenges of getting a message across, you'd say?
I think the most difficult thing that I've encountered, I don't know about anybody else, is being able to tailor that same message for various groups of people, right? Being able to appeal to a wide group of people, different demographics, it's challenging. To do it successfully is challenging.
How is it different? What different demographics? How would you shape? Like, what's one topic that you'd have to shape differently across demographic?
To get straight into politics, one topic. Okay, so the importance of fiscal transparency at the local government level, for example, to be able to explain why not having an asset register at City Hall is important, and not having that is a big reason why Georgetown is the way it is, right? To talk to somebody who is, perhaps understands what goes into a balance sheet, what goes into financial statements, and how those financial statements, what impact they have on data-driven, evidence-based decisions that as policymakers that we are elected to make, and how in the absence of that information, the decisions that we take, we don't know what we're in an information deficit, so we don't know what outcome necessarily, what impact that would have on the city.
It's just ad hoc.
Yeah, it's ad hoc, and so to be able to communicate that, for example, to somebody who is more, I'm trying to be politically correct here.
Yeah,
Somebody who's more educated. Let's say that somebody who's university educated versus somebody who's not.
No, that's right.
To be able to communicate those things, they still need to understand what's going on, but it has to be communicated in different ways.
Else it just comes across as political agenda or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Correct.
We'll get back to all of this, but just to backtrack and again, the unstructured nature. So, but we'll try to be a little structured today. So, before we get into your public service stuff, what is your sort of position in society? Like, what do you do?
So I'm an entrepreneur, and out of frustration, out of sheer frustration, and after many years of being a keyboard warrior, I was a great keyboard warrior. I challenged myself. As many people are, but I challenged myself to move from that space and actually do something about it.
Okay.
And so I last year I thought I would make myself available to campaign for the local government elections.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were your frustrations?
Just nothing being done. I live in Bel Air Park. I grew up in Bel Air Park since I was 5 years old, and it's just been the same ever since. So from 1992 to now, it's just been the same. Really, it's been the same. There's nobody comes around except during elections time, and even last local government elections, I didn't see anybody come around to try to win my vote or anything of the sort. It's just been the same issues over and over again, and so out of frustration, I made myself available and I ran the campaign. It was very, very grassroots. We walked house to house and we presented our case, and we were it looks like we were persuasive enough that we won that constituency.
Yeah, just FYI, I spent my childhood in Bel Air Park as well.
Oh, okay.
And the biggest issue, that still persists today, is that as soon as a drop of rain falls out the sky, it floods.
Yeah.
I remember my dad used to have to be flicking eels out of our yard with like a spade. And it just was bad. And today it's kind of, it's a bit better, but I guess there's still a way to go. But it's always been a problem there.
Yes.
Especially with the drainage. But yeah. So you won the constituency, and then how do you operate as an elected local public official?
So I try to do a lot of consultation. People's problems are not everybody has the same problems, though you do see on a macro level once you have enough data on the micro level. So talking from house to house, resident to resident, you do see the same issues popping up. You mentioned, for example, the flooding issues. One of the things that I did is I created a website just for the constituency, and I created a sort of a ticketing system, like customer service, so residents are able to log on and report issues, and it's tagged. So on the back end, I can see, okay, there's flooding, there's security, there's infrastructure issues, like with roads, for example, the street lights. Those are very common issues that, at the level of local government, are not really looked at effectively in the city of Georgetown. And so that's one of the first things that I set out to do. Is to work on those things. However, City Hall is a very, 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 very dysfunctional environment.
Just pause a quick second. So if you were to fix these issues, you have to get funding from City Hall.
Yes, since correct.
So you take it back. You take the issues back to them, and these are our problems. So from there, where does it go? They give you the money to fix it, or they supply the resources to fix it?
Okay, so as a councillor, we don't have we don't have much to do or any authority over the administrative arm of the city.
Okay.
Right? That the mayor, as the chief councillor, It's called that. Call him that for now. He's the main interlocutor between the policy-making arm, which is us, and the admin arm.
Okay.
So, and then we have these statutory meetings, which are twice a month,
Okay.
right? They're very long and ineffective. That's as an aside.
Sure.
But as a counselor, what I do is I take any issues. This is just one of the things that I must do is I take any issues that arise in my constituency and I bring them up at the statutory council meeting, or I can write to the mayor and make them, make sure that he's aware, so that then he can communicate with admin and make sure that action is taken.
Gotcha.
Right. Like a board of directors, the city council operates or is run by committee. Right. The problem is that it's very ineffective. So let's say that you have an issue with flooding. I take that issue to the statutory meeting. It's probably then sent down to the City Works Committee, which may not meet for another month. It's discussed there. They make a decision. It must then go back to the policy meeting of the policy statutory meeting, which may not be for another month. And then there you deliberate. You talk a lot. I've been on record as saying it's a talk shop, which it is.
Yeah.
And then finally, they may make a decision to let the city engineer go and look at the problem. Now, look at the time that has passed there. It's very often 2-3 months that has passed from the time that you've made your issue clear to when city has made a decision to not fix it, but to send the city engineer or somebody from his department to go and take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then very often what happens is that there are no resources. There's no money available to do those things, which is another kettle of fish.
Wow.
So that's why the city has been stagnant for a very long time, and people are frustrated. What I started doing, at least in my constituency, and I think other councillors, and I see it happening in all of the constituencies, is that central government has had to step in, and they've actually spent, I think, close to $3 billion on infrastructural works that are meant to have been done by the city of Georgetown.
But that still has to go through the bureaucracy of City Hall, right?
No.
Once they pump money in?
No. So I'll give you an example. In Bel Air Park, you mentioned that the flooding is a huge issue.
Yeah.
President Ali came to visit the constituency, the community, and the residents took those concerns to him. He asked the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority, along with the Ministry of Public Works, to see what they can do in Bel Air Park, for example. And so that went out to tender. I walked Bel Air Park with one of the engineers from the Ministry of Agriculture, from the NDIA, which falls under Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah.
Made a plan, see where the stagnation is, what needed to be addressed, what was the root cause of the flooding. That went out to tender. The plan to fix it then went out to tender. The tenders were received. Those tenders were awarded, and work have started. So if you drive down, for example, Epping Avenue now, you'll see that we're doing culverts. We're installing culverts. Yeah. We are doing concrete drains. We're in some cases breaking bridges that were double, triple, quadruple casted over that stopped the flow of water. All of those things. Those are things that ought to be managed by the city or being done by the city. But because it's so dysfunctional there, the central government has had to step in and do those things.
And that obviously does nothing for the capacity of City Hall. I mean,
no.
They just sort of know, okay, well, if we don't do it, somebody will just come along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think at that level, at the politics, looking at it, it rankles them, because to be frank, the city is run by the majority is the PNC councillors, right?
Yeah.
We have there's 30 seats at council, and there's 19 seats that are held by the PNC and 11 that are held by the PPP. And it rankles them, I think, that central government has gone around City Hall to do the works. It rankles them that the money wasn't made available directly to City Hall for those works to be done. But the way that City Hall is set up right now with the issues of financial transparency, just the other day I did a commentary on where that is on NCN.
I saw, yeah.
It's really awful, right? Bank statements weren't reconciled since 2021 until that came to light and we brought it up at a statutory meeting. Then they started to see what they can do about it. To not reconcile a simple bank statement speaks volumes about the horrendous lack of transparency and accountability in City Hall. And so I would never advocate for money to be just transferred over to City Hall without an improvement in the way that is managed. It would be tantamount to dumping money into an abyss.
Yeah.
And I can't in good conscience support that.
And they would also, I guess the thing they would go to would be that you're starving them of resources by not just giving more money.
Correct. But look. When I was recently elected, I went to the Princess Street Stone Depot, which is it's on Princess Street, just off of Cemetery Road, just to take a look at what was going on there, and the level of waste, of misuse of resources that I encountered there was appalling. It drove me to anger because garbage is a big issue in the city, right? And we could benefit a lot from having dumpsters and skip bins around the city. There, at the Stone Depot, I found maybe 20 dumpsters just rotting, covered in bush, really? Rotting. I found vehicles that just were maybe missing a sensor or missing a part, rotting there, that could very well be used again for the services, to provide services for the residents of Georgetown, just rotting there. That visit to me, it spoke volumes about the commitment of the city's commitment to financial transparency and accountability. And the stewardship of the resources that you have. Those things need to be fixed first. Those things need to be addressed first before I would support any sort of support from any sort of direct financial support from central government.
But what are the causes of these inefficiencies? Is it just a lack of good management? Is it the people working in these various departments are not good at their job? Where do these inefficiencies come from? Is money being moved somewhere else? Is it just an overall management problem? I
can't speak to the money being moved elsewhere, just because we're not provided with any sort of financial information. Sure. I've written to.
There's no accounting team there. No accounting.
But they don't provide any information. I had to basically carry on bad for that in a statutory meeting, just to be provided with deglossed income and expenditure information, which the report that we get is not accounting wise, it's not a correct income and expenditure statement. We don't get any balance sheet. We don't get any statement of cash flows, just because there is no asset register. To not be able to account for the assets that you have as a city is a gross indictment of how you manage the resources that you have. If you don't know what you own, you don't know what has been disposed of, it's just a horrible state of being right there.
The assets just started disappearing into the abyss. Whatever happens to them happens to them.
Yeah, they rot. My phone is just calling me so many times. Sorry.
It's okay. Busy man.
Yeah. Where were we? Yeah, so Georgetown's not in a good state in terms of the way that it's managed. It's not in a good state in terms of the human resource. The amount of the payroll from 2016 to 2024 has gone up. It has increased. In that time, the number of people working has also decreased. So
the payroll, as in people are getting paid more, or there are more people employed.
Yeah, I have a suspicion. This is nothing that I have been able to confirm yet. Is that there are ghost workers on the payroll? Okay. For example, it's 70% of the revenues that Georgetown receives goes towards that payroll. So there's only 30% left to provide residents with services.
But is there a record of what the occupations of these people are concentrated in? Like, are you paying drain cleaners? Are you paying, people work like overseeing market inspectors, whatever?
Yeah. There is. I haven't gone through it like an auditor would myself, but I'll give you an example. If you go to the Stone Depot again, there are people there. It's just one big lemon session. If you turn up there right now on a Friday morning, people are knocking dominoes and drinking rum. Right? These are people that are getting paid a wage.
Tell me what the Stone Depot is.
It is. I guess it's just like a laydown yard.
Okay.
Yeah, it's next to the solid waste management compound at
Gotcha.
On Princess Street.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just off of Cemetery Road. Just off of Cemetery.
And these
Road.
people are on payroll. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're on payroll. Up until recently, we had people on the road gangs on payroll. I don't know if there still are.
Making what a month?
I couldn't tell you, but they are receiving a salary even though the city has not maintained a single road in the last I don't know how many years because central government has taken up that mantle.
Is it possible to have a independent financial audit just to do a report to disseminate to the public?
Sure.
What's preventing that from happening?
What was preventing that, I think, was political will. You don't know what you're going to find, or you're scared of what you'll find. That said, we did push for audits. Our side, we pushed very hard for audits. Obviously, you can't do an audit if there are no financial statements. No, that's the first thing. They're unable. They use Excel is used. They use Excel as their accounting software, which in itself is crazy. So they needed help first to prepare the financial statements.
Yeah.
After that, then you can conduct an audit. Special audits have been conducted, right? So, for example, in 2015, I think 2015, the Auditor General did a special audit on a subvention that was given to the city to clean up Georgetown, etc. But when they did that special audit, the findings were scary. Vouchers weren't approved. The correct process wasn't followed, so it wasn't maybe a voucher wasn't approved or signed off by the person that was meant to have signed off on it. There was no record of a contract, for example. If you get a contract to do some debushing in the cemetery, perhaps there's no record of that contract being awarded. Mm-hmm. It was really an indictment on the way that city has been managed. That is a special report, a special audit that was done. In terms of an actual audit, I think the last one that was done was maybe in 2012. But even then, the Auditor General, because the Auditor General usually does the audits, had to issue a disclaimer saying that the vouchers and the information to verify those things, it just couldn't be found.
Yeah.
So you couldn't verify the authenticity of what was presented on the financial statements.
Yeah. At the end of the year, isn't it incumbent upon City Hall to say, well, these are all the things we've accomplished over the year past? I mean, just to sort of give an idea of how effective they are. Even in the years where they've received money, I mean, you can't. You received X amount of money, you can't say we did X and Y. You know what I mean? Like, or how does that work? I mean, don't they have to show something at the end of the year?
Yes, the
versus what central government will have to do.
Yes. So the law says that the city should provide an accounting of all the revenues and expenditures in the previous year by March 31st of the current year. That has never been done. I can't recall a year in recent memory when that was ever done. Mm-hmm. When that was ever done. The law is very clear about that. That needs to be done, and it needs to be open for public inspection. Yeah, so the law is extremely clear about that. This has never been done. Yeah. We don't have any idea how the money was spent. None.
So how do we move forward from here then? What's the plan?
I'm extremely frustrated at City Hall because I honestly don't have an answer for that. Mm-hmm. I really don't have an answer for that, short of doing something that is very draconian, which is just shutting up the whole thing and instituting something temporary, which violates so many principles of good governance and local government. So it's not something that I would advocate for, but I don't have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for anybody. How do you move forward from here?
Something like that would be just sort of setting up your own constituency body, taking money from central government to get the work done. Is that possible?
I don't understand. I couldn't speak to the legal ramifications or how that would work. I know it's been done before.
Yeah.
When there was an IMC, and IMC was done, I think in the early 90s, before an election in 1994. But I'm not really aware. It's not something that I would really advocate for. I think we just have to take it step by step. Get the audits done. Get the asset register completed. Reconcile the bank statements. Step by step. By step. It could be done, but I don't see that happening in the short term. There's no political will, for example, to get the audits done. It's something that we had to push very, very, very hard for.
Yeah. You know, when you, so I remember.
Sorry, and I just want to be clear. There's no political will on the part of the PNC councillors to push to really drive those those audits.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're in control of.
They have a majority.
Yeah.
19 seats to our 11.
Where is that most effective though? Where they can overrule everything, like when it comes to voting on what needs to be done.
Yeah, on anything. So I'll give you an example. When we were first sworn in, and we had to elect people to the different committees. There are some committees that are more important than others that are standing committees. That means that what is decided at the committee level does not need to go for ratification at the full council.
Okay.
Right. So
like what?
Like the finance committee,
Gotcha.
for example. Whatever they decide there, it does not need to be decided on or approved by full council. That is a decision that the finance committee has made, and that stands. So for all the committees, they just elected elected basically one or two PPP councillors, and the rest all PNC councillors, which means they have the final say on every decision. Yes, we can give inputs, and yes, we can make recommendations, and yes, we can speak to things that need to be done in the city. But when it comes down to it, at the vote, it's always along party lines, and they always end up making the decision. Sometimes we're in favor of the decision, sometimes we're not. But there's nothing that we can do.
Yeah.
So, for example, something like the decision to hire an independent auditor. We really pushed for it. They tried to prolong making the decision, but in the end, it was a decision that was supported by both sides.
Okay.
Right.
So you do find common ground on some things, and
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but the decisions that are truly important, we don't have much say in them.
Gotcha.
When it comes down to it.
Gotcha. So you started your political career associated with the Citizenship Initiative at the last election.
Correct.
And that's kind of was your entry point into politics?
Into
the space.
That was when I moved from the keyboard warrior space to actually trying to do something.
Yeah, which is fair. And I actually was at the TCI launch because last elections was my first year voting in Guyana, being in Guyana. So, it was very important to me. And like everybody else, I was very frustrated at the two-party system and all this stuff.
Where did you go to school somewhere?
I was in school abroad, yeah.
Oh,
so
where?
In Pennsylvania.
Oh, interesting.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Amish County.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I came back in 2016. So just when the government kind of right after it changed in 2015, had a couple of years. So, 2020 was a big year. And I remember, I went to the presentation. It was so nice to see, for the most part, young people with new ideas and stuff like that. And I remember seeing you there. I was very into what everyone had to say, to the point where I was, convinced I was going to vote for the party. The only reason I didn't is because they decided not to join. And I didn't think it would make sense because you do just the votes.
That was a very contentious decision within the party too.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, it just to me then it was very idealistic.
Yes, correct.
But
Correct.
so anyway, obviously it kind of and but they still did play a part in the whole election debacle, which I appreciated. But how was it sort of moving from there and deciding to get involved with this government? Obviously, that's a big decision to make coming from a third party. Was it just that you feel there was a role to play within the government now, or is it just that you felt that third parties just didn't make sense?
So for me, if I can just go back to 2015, when I voted for the APNU, for the coalition government, I quickly became very disenchanted with the policies that government started to pursue. So
Yeah.
I was already very unhappy with their policies. I mean, they've sort of viewed themselves, at least that administration, they sort of viewed themselves as the Ruel Johnson puts it as the it's like an Afro-Saxon class. It was more, to me, what ails Guyana is more of a culture, more of a class, of a clash of classes,
Yeah.
rather than straight out racism.
Yeah.
So in 2015, we elected a group of people who fancied themselves, for lack of a better way to put it, a higher class than the people that they're meant to be ruling over. And so they knew better what you or I needed for ourselves, for our lives, than we did. At least that's what they told themselves, right? And so the policies that they implemented really antagonized or really set back the private sector in Guyana a long way. And the policies that they implemented, things like putting VAT on education, for example, to me made absolutely no sense. And so I quickly became very disenchanted with them. I still held a very, I wouldn't say a negative view of the PPP. And personally, I was friends with leaders from the PPP, so I knew I had cut out through all the BS that we had seen on Kaiser News, and
Yeah.
I just thought that there ought to have been space for an independent third party and create a sort of a kingmaker scenario in Guyana. And like you said, I think we were very idealistic when it came to that. Personally, I had disagreements with policy that TCI, for example, had advocated. And so shortly after elections, the way that decisions were made and the way that policies were, like the decisions to compliment or to criticize certain policies, I just didn't agree with it, so I resigned. All this while at the same time I'm looking at a young, vibrant president who, as a complete contrast to President Granger, he was out there talking to everybody. He didn't fancy himself better than anybody. He was out there at 5 a.m. I would get notifications President Ali is live. He's out there talking to the people, and based off of those consultations, that is when they devise policies to drive those changes. And I very quickly saw transformations, physical transformation, but also a sort of enthusiasm again for Guyana's future.
Yeah.
Very quickly. And it's very hard not to support that sort of dynamism, enthusiasm, and positivity when it comes to governance. And it was just something that I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah. Also, coming out of Granger, it's a totally different energy.
Yeah.
Not to say, I mean, many people had high expectations of him, as did I.
Yeah, I certainly did.
I
Yeah.
genuinely did think he was a good guy. But, I think we've never really had leadership that really stimulates young people.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important, even with this government, I think there's so much more to go in that regard. Traditionally, politics to me has always been speaking to this old generation of, yes, we know how things supposed to be, so you don't worry, we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Whereas now it does feel a bit more engaging. It's not perfect by any means, but I think more young people are engaged.
Yeah, it's also important to find a balance because I shudder to think what I would have advocated for when I was very young.
Yeah,
Without with age comes a level of experience
sure.
and maturity that most young people just don't have. There's a lot of enthusiasm, yes, and with enthusiasm and very good ideas, but sometimes you need an older, wiser hand to sort of guide you and make sure that you don't run off the rails,
Yeah,
right? And I appreciate that. That's something that we've seen in this administration. Yes, it is a very young, dynamic leader who, by the way, has a lot of experience. I think he's been in the
sure.
public service, the parliamentarian, since he was 26 years old.
Hmm.
You know, he's 44 now or 45.
Yeah.
He's been around. He knows he has a lot of experience while at the same time being young.
How are you finding it in the party where it with regards to like criticism or difference of opinion? Like, is that something that is taken into consideration? Many people here in the country, regardless of who's in power, feel that speaking out on what they perceive to be wrongdoing or something that's not right, have this fear of being victimized. I think this is like a thing that haunts us as a nation. And many people still feel that way. How do you think that can sort of be changed, or is it changing? I know you might be slightly biased. That we all have a bias, but where do you see that going in the future in terms of accountability and transparency?
So it's two questions there. One of the questions you asked is how criticism of party decisions, let's say,
Sure,
is
yeah.
viewed by the party leadership. There's a very vibrant process through which that is done in-house, right? I think the culture of the party, and to be clear, I'm not a card carrying member of the PPP. I'm part of the civic component,
Understood.
but and I'm also quite new to that space. But from what I've seen, there's a very vibrant process through which people can voice their criticisms. It's important in the public domain to hold a united front, right? We see what's happening over there with the PNC, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, all their arguments and everything comes out in the public domain, and that has a huge impact on their perception, on how they're perceived by the public and by the voters. So in-house, I can say that there's a very vibrant process through which criticism is channeled, at least party-wise.
Yeah.
Now, whether now speaking on another front, whether people outside of the party, now this is not party politics now, but this is general politics. Whether I disagree or whether you disagree with a decision by President Ali or by a minister to do to implement a certain policy, and they're really quite open to it. If you go to any one of the President Ali's or Vice President Jack Dale's outreaches, which have been on quite a few, people voice their discontent all the time.
Yeah.
And more often than not, what ends up happening is that things are implemented to fix those.
Yeah.
Just the other day we had the vice president had an open public day at the convention center, and he met with everybody personally, like one-on-one. To me, that was crazy, and not everybody went there to praise the government. They all had grievances, they all had things that needed to be fixed and things that needed to be ironed out, and quite very open to fixing those.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I just want, and thank you for answering. I just wanted your opinion. I myself have seen that a friend of mine had recently invited me to the president, I think, was handing out land to the residents of Timeri for agriculture.
Okay.
And she said, "Oh, what are you doing?" She was helping me get people on the Gyaff to talk about different things. She's like, "Oh, come with us. Look at how the process is done. Look at how we deal with people and their concerns. So you get an idea of how the system works." Mm-hmm. I said, "Great, as long as I don't have to be in any PR pictures." So I went, and really it was surprising to me to see how the sort of level of communication that was done with people who had their there was a team designated to take in concerns. The president did it himself. And I know this is not perfect, and that just means, oh, well, they're doing this everywhere. But it to me, it showed like there is a system that is dealing with that. And they also informed me that, all the complaints are taken in and logged, and then they're put into a database and then followed up on.
Yeah.
And obviously, they're with capacity, and so some might slip through the cracks. But the fact that there's that infrastructure in place is a bit promising for me. And with criticisms in general, it's so easy because of the tense nature of our politics to cuss and carry on and get frustrated,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
and rightfully so. But it's easy to fall into that trap. So you really have to balance just sort of lashing out like that with, okay, but let me sort of take a step back, take a breath, and try and be a bit more practical about this. But moving forward, I think we need more innovative ways where people can sort of put like for example your website where you can log concerns and stuff like that. Those are the sort of innovative things that we need, so more people have that input.
Yes.
I find that missing in Guyana.
Yeah, there's so much to be done.
Yeah.
There's so much to be done, and a lot of systems can be improved. I'd be the first one to agree with that. Yes, a lot of systems could be improved. There is a drive in general to improve those systems, but Guyana has a history of being very resistant to change, and also a history of an entrenched bureaucracy,
Yeah.
right? I heard President Jagdeo call them little gods, innovating and implementing technology will mean a challenge to the entrenched bureaucracy, right? You no longer need somebody to collect my complaint, for example. It's just logged on a website, and anybody can check it. Not only can you check it, but there are tools to do data visualization, so you can see, I don't know how many people logged in, how many people complained about drainage, what percentage of people. Anyway, all of these things that effectively cuts out a large part of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right. People are resistant to that.
Do you think there's a threat of also it cutting off an underground economy of
Yes.
paying off to do this quickly and expediting that?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and people are resistant to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who, where in the system is resistant to that? Like, what stops that on a fundamental level? Because if you just come in and decide to revamp a system, who is blocking that? Is it, if the decisions are made from the top, then doesn't everybody have to comply?
You would think, right? You would think decisions that are made from the top. The public service has a lot of rules, for example. It can be disciplined and how it can be done. And just, can you imagine the level of micromanagement that a minister or a president would have to be doing just to make sure that a clerk one in an office somewhere isn't engaging in some sort of underground economy skullduggery. That is a level of micromanagement which I think is it's very inefficient, right? But it's also very difficult to do.
Well, how would you say we get out? I mean, I don't expect the answers from you. I don't think anybody really knows else it would have been done. But what's a step towards getting out of entrenchment?
I think innovation and technology is. And there is a concerted drive for that. So, for example, the single window, there's a single window sort of software system that has been implemented now with Ministry of Housing and the local government. So currently, the way that it's always been done, if you want to get permission to build something, you got to go to all the different local government places, get their permission, and you got to go to CHPA and get their permission and all that stuff. Now, this is going to be a single window where everything's done online, right? You no longer have to maybe pay off somebody to fast track the thing, Yeah. So those things are happening. It's just, I don't think a lot of people appreciate the amount of data that needs to be managed there, and the scale at which those things need to be done. So you can do those things very quickly, but it might be very expensive, and it might be very glitchy at low quality. So the trick is to have a strategic plan, which they do have, and to move in manageable at a manageable pace to drive those changes.
Yeah,
I see that happening. I see that happening. At least there's a political will now to get that done.
yeah. So you said you're like me, I guess. You know, your role in our society is an entrepreneur, and I think like there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs these days with where Guyana is going. Many more services and products to offer into the market. For you, what have been some of the challenges, with your business and sort of being able to operate within our system here?
So I think maybe the one thing that is the most challenging thing is access to finance. You can have the most brilliant idea in the world, but in Guyana, our banking system here, our bankers are very risk averse. They're used to doing to banking the way that they have always done it, and so for a young entrepreneur who has a good idea, it's just very difficult to access that finance. Which I don't think that from 2015 to 2020 that the government then really did much about it. But I see that this government has done things like they've worked in the agricultural space, for example, in poultry and so on. They've worked with the commercial banks to provide lower interest loans for those for people in the agri entrepreneurs, for example. I noticed in the budget that just passed, for example, they made it a priority to work with the commercial banks again to provide low interest loans to lower income people. That would have a huge impact on entrepreneurship. Just the ability to get a little bit of financing for your idea goes a long way. And personally, in my experience, access to financing was always a challenge as well. Right?
Why do you think commercial banks are so risk averse?
Because again, it's an aging bureaucracy. It doesn't just apply to the public sector, but also we see it in the private sector as well. Many bankers, I think, this is my opinion, they don't know about new technology, new innovations that have come out, for example, and how practical they are here in Guyana. So if you don't know a technology that a young entrepreneur is coming to borrow money from you for, then you're going to turn it down. Especially when, for example, what is the interest rate that as a depositor you make here in Guyana on your money? Maybe 0.8%, 0.9%.
I don't even know.
A commercial bank right now could take the money in their account. So not their money, but the depositor's money. Take that money and buy a US T-bill that currently is paying 5.3%. And they're paying the depositors 0.8. That spread is huge.
Yeah.
Right? Why would they want to go and underwrite what they term a risky project when they can just go out and make 5.3% interest rate on a guaranteed U.S. Treasury bill and only pay out 0.8% on it? You know, I think that maybe the regulatory system here, when it comes to that, I'm sure they're working on it, but I think that plays a huge role in it as well. How incentivize their banks to actually underwrite projects in Guyana for young that are not the typical I'm going to buy a plot of land here and I'm going to build apartments and not those typical kinds of projects, but projects that require more that bring more innovation and newer technologies and things like that.
Yeah.
How willing are they when you can really go abroad and do that with your money, right?
For sure. Yeah. No, I hear you. I just think also from a fundamental level, like we're such a cash economy. People are just so scared to move away from that. Like my wife and I, whenever we get time off, we go traveling in the first world countries. We just came back from England and the US, and everything is just you tap your card and
That's
you
a
go
trip,
through.
right?
Yeah, it's like crazy. But I mean, it's a different world how like commerce works. Like it's so easy, and people want to spend more money because you kind of know it's just like not really carelessly, but you kind of are. You look at your finances a different way. It's like having to go to the ATM when I need something, to then go to the groceries, to then go back to the ATM, to and then I ain't got change, and it's just such a hassle. You're scared about somebody going to rob you. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Like right now, if a company doesn't accept cards, I don't go. I don't buy anything. I was in London too, and one of the things that struck me was even the buskers there. The people that are playing music out like in front of the London Eye, for example.
Yeah. You
just go on tap.
Yeah, you don't have to throw your
You don't
coins
have to
in.
throw
They're
your
like,
coins
yeah,
in
just
anymore.
tap here.
Yeah.
But I think also, there's again, going back to the entrenchment and all ideas, there is a hesitancy of like trust towards the banks. And we've seen some incidents happen in the past. I don't know what they were, if money was taken or if it was just a late transaction of whatever you bought 2 months ago. But I think there also needs to be more trust built between Guyanese and the banks, where they feel that their money isn't being taken away.
Right.
And you also have to be on top of your finances too. You can't just sort of not look at it for months and then go back and see, I've spent this and that. It's a weird. I don't know how we get there.
One of the things with that banking is, I think also the software, the systems that they use. I mean, if I buy something today and it's not reflected in my account until 5 days from now, I lose track of that.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. So when you see if I spend something today and I go and withdraw money right away, that the receipt is not gonna reflect my true balance. So I may think, okay, well, I have this amount of money, and then 5 days later, when the money comes out of my account, and you check for somebody who may not be checking their account all the time and seeing all these things, that does cause trust issues in the
Yeah, when I use my credit card in the US, as soon as I swipe it, I get the notification.
Correct,
on my phone,
right.
And it's like, good. And actually, when I don't get the notification, I'm like, what's going on? Like, like I kind of that's when I get worried.
Yeah. Scotiabank does that here now, by the way.
Yeah, so does Republic Bank. You get an email.
Okay.
For the most
For
part.
everything?
Everything I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's how you build trust.
Exactly.
That's how you build trust, by making more, by fighting data asymmetry and information asymmetry, and just by making more information available to people and making it more easily accessible. That's how you build the trust with them. So that's how it's done. They question less when all the information is there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think building off of that, there's so much opportunity for technological innovation, the use of apps to just make these processes easier. We're kind of seeing it with like transportation. There's some like Book a Ride, I think, and
There's
stuff like
Book
that.
a Ride, there's Ride GY, there's Lewy Ride.
Oh,
Those are,
yeah, I didn't know there were so many. Yeah, and you just straight from the card, get it. Do you see that with GT Eats? They
I
have a
love
couple of
GTs,
it.
by the way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
nice, nice. Yeah, it's a great idea for us, and yeah, it just sort of beats the traditional way of doing things. It's convenient.
Yeah.
But you can bring that to so many different businesses as well, or sectors.
Yes, but there's a challenge right now in that I don't know that many banks, or that any bank offers the ability to process online payments currently. So a company like GT Eats, for example, I'm pretty sure they have a don't want to call their name. Let's just say that if you're a company that wants to offer those online payments, you might have to set up an account outside of Guyana to facilitate that. Because as far as I know, there's no way, for example, for me to set up an online business and have people and give people the ability to pay online using their debit card.
I'm pretty sure you can. I'm pretty sure that's what you don't use your local card for those transactions.
For GT Eats?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is that the payment processor is not a Guyanese payment processor.
Oh, gotcha. Explain that to me. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
what
so
you
there's
mean.
like payment processors like Stripe, like PayPal,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But they don't work in Guyana. So if I
Gotcha.
have a business and I wanna be able to process
Okay.
your payments, it doesn't matter if it's a Guyanese card or not, but as long as it's a Visa card, for example, you would have to use one of those. There's also I
What
think
difference does it make?
VeriSign.
What difference does it make?
What difference does
Does having using a PayPal?
PayPal or
Or
Stripe or the only difference is I guess in the fees that they charge.
okay,
But
so it's just more
but you
fees.
can't set up one. You can't set up an account and put Guyana. So there's no
Okay.
way for them to collect that payment and put it in your account here in Guyana,
Gotcha.
right? That doesn't. There's no banks here don't offer that service.
Gotcha.
So that's where the challenge is for a company that wants to offer an online service.
Okay,
for
so
instance.
for example, if I have an online, I have a transportation service. I'm doing Uber here, my own Uber, and it- so basically I'm getting the money, and it's going to a U.S. account.
Yeah, I think
What I
now
receive
there's
is
yeah.
going to a U.S. account.
Yeah, not necessarily U.S. I think there's also WePay. So I think eNetworks.
Right.
I don't like calling out these businesses
No,
names.
no, no. Sure,
but,
sure,
but,
sure. Yeah.
but I think they use WePay. I think WePay is a Trini
Gotcha.
is a Trini payment processor. Again, that I don't know if WePay allows for the immediate deposit in a local Guyanese bank. That's going to be a challenge for anybody doing that.
The issue they're
Space
moving
here.
forward with those kind of things is the fact that you can't. How do you tax that if it's not,
Well, there's
local?
when you repatriate the money, you have to bring the money back into the
Gotcha.
into Ghana. You got to report it. I don't know. I think that the legislation needs to it's important that the legislation be updated.
Yeah.
That would allow banks. I don't know if it has been updated. If it has been updated, but the last time that I really investigated, it needed to be updated to allow banks to cater for those things.
Yeah. And going back to entrepreneurship, it feels like as a small business, it's really hard to keep up with if you want to be above board, and paying your taxes and going by the law. It's really hard to be competitive with so many other businesses that are sort of getting these breaks and cutting corners. Is there a way to maybe, especially because we're growing as an economy, to allow smaller businesses more incentive to catch up or to reduce their taxes even further? It seems like, if you're making $200,000 a month, which is not much at all, you're still taxed heavily on that. It just doesn't seem like easy to me. I think I'm not really sure. I'm not really an accounts guy, but I just feel like there could be more exemptions to encourage growth for small business.
So there's to encourage growth. Without I'll talk about the taxation in a minute, but there are revolving funds. There's a small business fund. There are all sorts of things that are in existence right now that would help a small business owner get funding for an idea. Now it's not a tremendous sum. It's not a huge amount of money, but it does help. It does go a long way. So the Small Business Bureau, for example, does provide funding to and grants, so loans and grants,
Yeah.
to small businesses. So that in itself goes a long way. Sometimes all you need is just a little capital injection to go. In terms of the fiscal incentives, I think that a policy like that needs a lot more nuance. So it's important to look at things from maybe from a macro level as well. So, for example, in the education space, in the healthcare space, it doesn't matter if you're a small business or a big business. The government has abolished income taxes, corporate taxes, for in those spaces. So, if you start up, for example, a tutoring business in the education space, there's you don't pay any corporate taxes. That's gotten rid of. Same thing in the healthcare space. If you're in healthcare and you want to start maybe a telemedicine small company or an on-call company where you provide healthcare services to to people on call. So you send somebody to their house, etc.
Yeah.
Those are tax. Those are tax free. The corporate taxes have been removed from that space.
Gotcha.
I think those sorts of fiscal incentives are managed more on a macro level, where a policymaker wants to incentivize investment in a particular industry or sector.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, tourism, for example, there are a lot of incentives. It doesn't matter if you're a small company or a big company. There are a lot of fiscal incentives for investments in that space, right? A lot.
Yeah.
More than I would say, more than any other sector right now in the tourism space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fiscal incentives. So they're not specifically targeted towards a small business. What I noticed, because I'm not part of the policy formulation process, but I can make my observations, sure. and I agree with it. What I noticed is that the government has spent a lot more energy in bringing down the cost of financing. So in specific sectors, right? And at specific income levels. So if you're a lower income, like I mentioned earlier, if you're a lower income in a lower income bracket, it's easier for you to qualify for a lower interest loan in the agri space, in the small business space, etc. Those sorts of incentives, which people should take advantage of those things. I don't know how well informed they are, but you should take advantage of those things. Go a long way towards. They have a big impact on small businesses. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's just good to be more aware of these things. And me, I feel like every time someone comes on, I ask their opinion, because I myself am quite ignorant. I do as much as I can in terms of research and stuff. I think a frustration of just small business owners is just constantly, hearing this narrative of, these great things to come, and seeing these big businesses thrive and get these exemptions. And, when things are slow, especially when the economy is on a bit of a kind of standstill on a small scale level, it gets a bit frustrating.
Yeah. Maybe a slight diversion, but it's relevant to the topic. I think we're a victim of our own success right now in the oil and gas space.
Yeah,
right.
Totally agree.
We're a victim. Not that it has had a deleterious impact on the economy, but it's just that people see the amount of money that is being generated, the amount of revenue that is being generated in that sector, and the feeling is that as a Guyanese citizen, you need some of that right now.
Yeah.
But if you put it in context, it's really not that much money that is being generated yet. It's not enough. It's not sufficient enough as yet, for example, to create lasting wealth. And a lot of people bring up the example of Norway, right? But people don't know that Norway first started producing oil, I think, in the 1960s, in the mid 1960s, and for the first 20 years, they blew that. They blew that completely on social welfare spending. Mm-hmm. They artificially raised salaries. They lowered the retirement age. They blew that, and it bankrupted their economy. It wasn't until in the early 90s that they established their sovereign wealth fund. I think it's called the Global Pension Fund or something like that. But for those 19 years, those first 19, and even after they established this sovereign wealth fund, it took them 6 years to actually save anything. They spent it on things like infrastructure and on things like that. Only after that were they able to start saving. We started producing oil at the end of 2019. It hasn't even been. It's been 5 years.
Yeah. And
for context, this last budget, which people tout these numbers, $1.1 trillion, but only 1/3 of it was financed by oil and gas revenues.
Yeah.
People want to see. I've heard that, for example, the PNC say, or the WP. I'm not gonna call party names or whatever, but that people need to give, or it's important, or they'll give people or families $1 million a month or $1 million a year, those kinds of things. But just to put something into context, right? The amount of money that is generated by the oil and gas industry is very dependent on the price of oil.
Yep.
right? And the price of oil is very volatile, right? Right now, I think I saw something, the IEA is predicting that the oil could fall, the price of oil could fall to $60 a barrel. So what's going to happen to our economy, for example, if we implement a lot of these welfare things right now without creating any baseline wealth for ourselves first, right? If we tie public servant salaries to, in effect, the price of oil now, right? What's going to happen in 10 years? Let's say that the price of oil drops. It's going to be something, it's going to become unsustainable. So first, the priority, I think, it's a politically difficult decision because any government could just say, yeah, man, take a million here, take a million there, and win elections from now till the end of time, which I think is what Chavez tried to do, and not create any real baseline wealth.
Yeah.
Right? It's a politically difficult choice to make because you take flack. Why are the people still starving? You know, those sorts of narratives. Not that not that they're not important, but look at Venezuela right now. They had a massive welfare state going on, but when the price of oil collapsed, their economy collapsed because they didn't build any sort of any wealth generating things in their economy, right? Everything was tied to oil. Everything was tied to oil. It's a difficult decision to make as a policymaker and as a politician. Things like, for example, investing in decreasing our energy costs. It's very expensive to do right now. To that investment, that capital expenditures, it's a lot of money. But in 5 years, in 6 years from now, where we will be able to have a successful manufacturing industry that is going to create wealth for people, right? We can, start up our own agri processing business, our own furniture manufacturing business because of lowered electricity costs. But if we tie people's revenue and people's salaries directly to the oil prices, when the oil is no longer with us or when the oil prices have collapsed, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah.
So the need to create baseline wealth first is important. It's important, and I think it's something that is a difficult narrative to.
Well, it's a hard thing to spin. I mean,
it's a hard thing to spin.
I totally agree.
Correct.
I totally agree with what you're saying, by the way. But just to play devil's advocate here, you're putting the trust in politicians, whoever they may be, to create something lasting that works, right? We really haven't seen something major that has really changed the economy of Guyana, in this day and age, or
I think they're so.
They just to close my point on this is that, so it's like, I don't trust the politicians to have this big transformation using that money now. So I just rather collect $1 million now and figure something out. And I think that's kind of what people are thinking.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, when you're kind of jaded, it's
but
like, just give me the money.
Take that logic down the road, though, right? You take $1 million now and you build and you're good, right? You can go, you can travel, you can do a whole bunch of things. You can pay for your expenses. But what happens when you no longer have the $1 million? You wouldn't have had anything of your own that's going to generate $1 million for yourself in 10 years.
Well, sure.
Maybe
you don't have to. You don't have to spend it out though. You could invest it.
Correct. You could invest it.
And again, I'm not saying it's right. Or whatever's right. I'm just saying, it's like you said. It's a difficult decision to spin whoever's in power.
I wouldn't say to spin. It's just to explain. Spin has such a negative connotation.
Oh yeah.
To explain.
Well, to convince that this is gonna happen for sure. By the way, I'm dying for cheap electricity.
Right?
I think that's what's gonna do it.
And there's one of two ways that you can get cheaper electricity. The government could just subsidize it. Say, here, take $100 off, or take $1,000, or take $100,000 every month towards your electricity bill, which the cost to generate that electricity, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Now, but your electricity bill is lower because the government is subsidizing it. But then what happens when the money runs out?
Yeah.
What happens when the money runs out? And to your point, as you haven't things you haven't seen anything that's like life, that's transformative, that's life changing yet. I mean, the scale of time has also been with 5 years, 5 years, 5 years
Sure.
producing, right?
Sure.
But those, like for example, the electricity investments in electricity, that is going to have a crazy transformative impact on people's livelihoods. If you have a small logging concession, for example, and whereas you were selling logs to, you're exporting logs, now you're able to do value added, right? Because and be competitive on the world market because of the cost of electricity has gone down,
Yeah.
right?
Do you think it's solely dependent on electricity prices to move forward? Because if we just apply this, because right now the conversation we're having is banking on the money we're going to get from oil and gas, right? To transform Guyana.
Well, we're using that money now. That's
Well,
right?
yeah, but and we're saying the argument right now that we're having is that it's not been that long yet. So we got to give it some time. How come we couldn't do that with like gold and bauxite and that kind of stuff? Like, you know what I mean? And this is kind of the argument I'm going back to. Why couldn't governments prior use that money to develop the economy? Because that's a significant amount of money. We have a ton of natural resources here, which we've exploited. Why will it be any different with oil and gas?
So let me give you an example. I think it's just in governments that it's just reflected in government's priorities. If you look at a government budget, the expenditure has two there's two main segments of expenditure, right? There's the current expenditure, which is like wages, the bills, those kinds of things, the welfare benefits that you pay out. That's sort of recurrent expenditure, which the more you spend on that, the more politically popular you are, right? People are happy when their pension increases. People are happy when their salaries increase. When if you're a public sector employee, they're happier. So if you look at budgets I looked at budgets from like 2014 to, I'm a politician, so I looked at budgets under the PNC, under the APNU, and they dedicated most of their expenditure, most of the budget, to recurrent expenditure. Things that you saw they increased their salaries by 50%. They hired more people. Those kinds of things. So when you are not willing to make or to invest a lot in capital expenditure, right, in terms of building roads, how many major infrastructural projects were finished between 2014 and 20? I'm just using this because this is something that I have a lot of data on.
Yeah.
How many major infrastructural, how many highways were built in that time period? Not many, and it's not because the money wasn't there. It's just that because the proportion of money that was being earned was being spent on recurrent expenditure that doesn't build or leave anything, or leave a legacy, right? It's just it's burnt now. It's like if I'm looking at my household, for example, is if I spend everything, all my income now on, I buy a new fancy computer, I buy 17 ACs for my house, and I don't save any of that and or spend it on a capital thing, right? Maybe solar panels that's going to decrease my expenses in the future. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
If I do that, then 5 years from now, I will still be in the same place.
Yeah.
It just comes down to a matter of political will and fiscal choices. And I would argue that in the past, as politicians, you have to make those difficult decisions. And unfortunately, many of our past politicians and past leaders made the easy decision to just spend the thing on recurrent expenditure.
Yeah.
And the tough decisions to invest in long-term projects, long-term things that will drive the revenue base or our wealth base here in Guyana, just wasn't done for a myriad of reasons. Political reasons, infrastructural. So what I mean by that is like, I don't mean like physical infrastructure, but just the way that the governments are set up, the bureaucracy, for example.
Yeah.
Those are reasons why, yes, we have a lot of rich, very wealthy with natural resources, but the political will and the decisions on where to spend and how to spend, people, I think we just took the easy way out.
Yeah. For sure. Completely agree. As a politician now, do you think that choosing to forego the increase in these recurrent expenditures moving into this election next year is sort of a hard choice to make? I mean, how do you manage that? Because you have to keep people happy while showing them, okay, I'm not paying you because we're doing this, right? So, how does this sort of government have to balance those two? Because and to me, I think a big part of it is that the opposition screwed up so bad the last election that they kind of now have breathing room. They can afford to sort of make these hard decisions. But I mean, they still have to, leading up to next year, people are going to be like, well, we got to see something now. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be a higher expectation when the vote comes up. So what are your thoughts on that? Or how they have to play that?
So, to be clear, I don't speak for any of those policymakers.
You're speaking
right?
as an independent, as a total independent. I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of a party. I'm just saying, like, it's a weird thing to juggle in our political landscape now.
What I'm saying is that you just have to find the right balance between the recurrent expenditure and the capital expenditure. Those sorts of investments.
Yeah.
I would never say that everything should just be done on the capital expenditure and nothing be done to improve people's welfare.
Yeah.
So I've seen the increases in the pension and those kinds of things are very important. Mm-hmm. But yes, like you said, elections are coming up, and the politically easy way out is not out, but a politically very rewarding thing to do is just to say, here, hold 100,000 more this every month, right? That's a politically easy tactic. But if you truly love your country, if you truly love Guyana, and you're interested in Guyana's well-being in the long run, and not just your well-being as a politician, then our leaders have to make those difficult decisions and be willing to live with the consequences.
Yeah, fair. Totally respect that.
Now the consequences, I think Guyana would be really, really in a horrible position where the PNC to return to power. I make no bones about it. I mean, I heard somebody say that the best thing that could have happened to the PPP is that the APNU, whatever they call themselves, got a chance to govern for 5 years to show that not much has changed. I mean, just the other day I was going through our electoral history. Well, we had elections in 1968, electoral fraud. 1973, same thing. 1978, same thing. 1973, 1980, same thing. 1985, same thing. They lost power in 1992. The minute they came back, same thing. I mean, we hear a lot, oh, don't focus on the past. Forget about the past. Why are you focusing on the past? But it's important for us to evaluate track records to make decisions on the future. I mean, you don't make a decision on the future blindly.
But how far back do you go? I mean, because to that point...
Go back 5 years. go back to 2015 to 2020.
That's fair. Yeah, but if you're going back to the 60s and 70s, then, that works both sides too,
Correct, but now I'm speaking about respect for democracy and
I hear you. I hear you.
Right?
I hear you. But I will make very clear though that I think corruption is just as important to talk about.
Yeah, of course.
That's all I'll say. But 5 years, that's fine. I mean, and just to end that note, because I know that gets very contentious among people. But just how that was done was so bumbling and terrible and disrespectful, given where we are with phones and everybody having a camera and just seeing everything in real time. It was such a slap in the face. I think we would have had really stiff competition if it was just a loss, or even if people came out and say, "Oh, we messed up big time."
Right? If
I for one would still be, wow, this is I don't know what to do. But 5 years is such a short time. it's still so fresh, and then with zero accountability with something that transparently fumbled.
Dude.
It feels very thing to me.
As far as I'm aware, I think only Gaskin came out and said, yeah, this was horrible. This happened, but everybody else has been just gaslighting. Has been just
But
gaslighting.
that's the thing.
us.
Well,
No, we didn't do it.
I follow it, and again, I just.
I know it ought not to be contentious.
It's a shitty topic
But-
to talk about, but like I follow it because I want to know. Look, I genuinely think the opposition is so important.
Yes.
Whether it's the PPP
Yes.
or the PNC
Yes.
that's in opposition,
Yes.
you need a strong opposition.
Yes.
And it starts with accountability. And well, I was a few weeks ago. I was just reading the leadership on what they were saying when they announced that. Aubrey Norton and Roysel Ford is in the race, and I think they asked both candidates. Or I think it's Starbuck News is like, how do you reconcile being a leader, while not addressing directly the role of the alleged rigging in the elections? And I think they'd asked that to Roysel Ford, who was like the lawyer representing the party side. And he said something along the lines of, "Oh well, my business as a professional has nothing to do with, what I stand for the country, and I'm like, or for my people or whatever." And I'm like, but how could you just separate the two? They're not mutually exclusive, It's whatever you do is obviously a reflection of your character and integrity.
Something so egregious.
Yeah,
Something so
and
egregious.
then
Yes.
Aubrey Norton, on the other hand, was. Well, I know, but no rigging. I'm like, I was just like, I don't know, man. Like, and look, and I have a ton of respect for people in that party. By the way, they've come on this show just like how you've come on, and
I saw.
I'm really happy for Sheridan and Amanza, by the way, who were nominated.
Yeah.
We need young leadership and a change, new ideas, and so, but. It's just an interesting dynamic we're in, and I think again, people aren't stupid. Just like how we have questions about things happening in this government right now. I was tuned into the press conference yesterday.
That's a weekly ritual for me every Thursday.
Yeah, well, particularly me. I mean, I my thing was, and I don't know if you'd be up for discussing it, but so. We're looking at sanctions by the U.S., right? It's weird to me that the U.S. says we're sanctioning these people, inclusive of someone in government, and then the government is like, oh, well, now that the U.S. are we're sanctioning them for tax evasion in Guyana, and then the government turns around and says, oh, well, now that the U.S. brought it up, we'll probe into it and see what's going on. Does that mean the U.S. has to tell us about all our problems for us to explore them? You know what I mean? Like it feels like we have no autonomy over the situation.
No, you know what? I understand that point of view. It doesn't mean that the U.S. has to tell us about our problems, but I think there's a serious concern about investigative capacity in Guyana and and this is just me speaking as an
individual.
Investigative capacity in Guyana, and let's just say investigative capacity in Guyana. I know that, and if you listen to any of, if you go back enough, or if you listen to Vice President talking, or even President Ali talking, or the Minister of Finance talking, you know that they had always said it is a serious issue of gold smuggling. In Guyana, it's been a serious thing going back years, right? I think what Guyana lacks is a sort of, or what impacted Guyana in this case is the lack of investigative capacity and an investigative will. I don't know how many people were compromised, in that space. I don't really want to speak too much about it since I'm not very familiar with the situation.
No, for sure.
I only know what I've seen in the public domain. But I would say that it's not a lack of political will at the top. but there's a dearth of investigative capacity.
It
in
may not
our
be, there may not be a lack of political will, but it just reeks of incompetence in terms or capacity
capacity.
to bring any sort of justice, you know what I mean, or to solve something. I mean, and this just goes beyond. This is only an issue of discussion because it's a big thing. It's a huge thing in our face, but this happens every day. I mean, this happens on the road. This happens with people, you know, getting murdered and just not getting justice. The system doesn't really work. So, it in a few months it'll all be forgotten and we're on to the next thing. You know, I don't think. To me, it's just a systematic problem where we don't really deal with many of these issues. I'm not saying everything gets through the system. I'm just saying, you know, if we, no matter how much money we have or develop as a society, we never really truly develop unless, you know, there's
Some of those systemic things need to be improved,
right.
need to change.
mean, and right now it's this government's problem. You know, it's one thing to say, oh well, back then they didn't. They say that. I don't care. I don't care because now I'm looking to you for leadership. You be in the government, not
Yeah.
I'm sorry to put you in this spot, by the way.
Leadership I would be able to
I'm sorry to
provide.
put you in this spot, by the way. I'm just, but it's just, yeah, I'm looking to you, so it's your problem because I'm a Guyanese citizen. You're my leader. Are you leading the country? You're leading us. Fix it. Like, let's do something about it.
These aren't short-term fixes, huh? These are serious systemic issues that need to be addressed through a very holistic approach, and the political opposition and civil society has to be involved in it, right?
Yeah.
The way that the laws, the current law, you know, I saw there's a constitution reform commission that was recently set up, as well as a law reform commission. Mm-hmm. So you need to look at a lot of those things, like the penalties, for example. I Vice President Jack Deo's press conference, he spoke about the penalties of gold smuggling and tax evasion, which currently are nothing as a deterrent. You're doing gold smuggling, and you look at it and it's like, all right, well, if anything, I can just pay the little fine, pay back what I was supposed to pay.
Yeah.
But the law doesn't provide for serious deterrents for breaking it, and those things. And then when you juxtapose that, or when you combine that with corruption at the lower ranks of the police and so on,
Yeah.
it's a recipe for disaster. You know, it's not a minister that's getting rid of evidence at the police station. It's a constable, for example,
Yeah.
or you know, a charwoman or a cleaner who just gets paid. Okay, just make the file disappear. So those things need to be strengthened, and I'm encouraged because I've seen that there's the will to do so, even though it may be again a politically difficult choice, you know. There's always a politician always has to toy with moral hazard, which is where you make decisions and you don't necessarily pay the price for the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
So as a politician, you need to be a really good leader, a really strong leader, forward-looking, forward-thinking, and take the time to make important decisions. Make decisions that are for the good of everyone, which is very difficult to do as a politician, because some of those decisions are either going to make sure that you get reelected, or that you may lose election. You may lose an election. Mm-hmm. But that decision that led to you losing an election is the right decision to make for your people and for the country, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that moral hazard comes in. And as a politician, as a leader, you need to grapple with that.
For sure. Just my last topic of discussion, and thank you so much for being so open to talking about all these things. It's been really enjoyable for me so far to just hear your perspective. What do you think about the local content issue that's sort of been going on? The government's come out and said, you know, we're not going to allow, these companies to come in and rent a citizen just to have the local content checked off.
the local content legislation that we have in Guyana is actually one of the stronger ones around the world. Huh? And it's
Stronger
not
in what sense?
in terms of its requirements. So it's not just about 51% ownership in in a company. It goes deeper than that. So it specifies the number of Guyanese directors that need to be in the company, which is different to owning the company, as well as to the number of Guyanese employees in the company. In some industries or some sectors, it's as high as 75%. I think 75% or 100% of the employees, not just the owners, but the employees need to be Guyanese. So the legislation it encompasses more than just ownership of the company. So yes, there are loopholes, and I think foreign companies, and there are two ways to view it. I think some foreign companies have found loopholes around it, and the government has obviously realized, and that's where they're coming. That's where their whole rent to citizen thing. Yeah. I have seen that. I've actually seen that. One way to look at it, as if you're a foreign company, is okay. This is my company. It's my intellectual property. It's my know-how. It's my technology. It's my capital, and I just give it 51% ownership to somebody who hasn't contributed to the company. That's sort of difficult, right? And that's sort of, in my opinion, it sort of incentivizes this whole rent to citizen scheme, or fronting. On the other hand, for a lot of these sectors or industries are very capital intensive. It's very difficult, or not many Guyanese people have the capital to invest in a thing. Which I've heard President Ali consistently encourage consortiums, right? Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example of that. In the ship chandlery space, is it the catering space? I think that's the right word I use. I'm not sure. There was I think a French company called Nurest.
Nurest, yeah.
Right, and they had. They were providing most of the ship chandlery services.
They partnered with Maggie's and a couple other people.
Right, a consortium was formed. The Germans, I think, with Maggie's and some other local ones, and now they own most of the company. Yeah. Right. So it's about closing that loophole, but the perception that the perception that it's just a scheme that rent a citizen, or that there are people who are exploiting it. Yes, it happens because it's sort of incentivized in a way. But also, I don't think there's enough focus on the success stories in terms of local entrepreneurship and the impact on local entrepreneurship, focusing on the 51% thing that we've seen in Guyana. Yeah. Right? Sure. Yeah, my company, for example, I don't like to talk about it, my company, very much. But yeah, I mean, we got a partner, a foreign partner. Right, we're still the majority owners in it. It's a consortium of people. It's not just me anymore. We retain their ownership, and it's all above board, right? It's all above board. So, I think the local content legislation in Guyana goes a long way towards sort of righting the huge wrong that was done with the PSA agreement that was signed in 2016. It does. There are loopholes, and I see that they're moving to right those. Yeah, but yes, you're right. It could be a lot. It could be stricter.
Yeah, well, either way, I hope it encourages more local people to step up and really take it to the next level. I find a lot of business here have traditionally become complacent.
Yes.
And I will say that we need more. We need more people setting a industry standard.
Dude, it's hard. Yeah. Running and establishing and growing a business is hard. Yeah. I think there is a sort of expectation here in Guyana that now that there's oil and gas and that there's a local content thing, that your struggles are over. But it's hard. It's hard, dude. Running and growing a business is very hard. And especially all the more so in a country like Guyana now, where there's all the opportunities in the world, but there's a lot of competition, right? There's a lot of competition, a local competition, and there's a lot of foreign competition. So you have to as an entrepreneur, it's not just going to be gifted to you. You got to work and find ways to be successful and to grow your company, right? Otherwise, you'll perish.
Yep. Well, on that note, thank you. That was a great message. And Alfonso, I just want to say, man, thank you so much for making the time for me. I really hope that, this inspires a lot more young people like yourself to come on and give their opinion and just discuss these everyday happenings, what we're going through. Everyone has a different opinion. It's so lovely to hear perspectives that we've never heard before. And I'm really happy that you're so involved in local government, because I think we need more people like you in there, making us aware of what's going on and how maybe we could even get involved and be part of the change. So thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Alex. It was a very pleasant conversation. The time really flew.
Yeah.
I feel like we needed to have some rum or something.
Next time for sure, we'll have some rum. Promise. Thanks a lot, man.